So I grew up in the back of a comic book store with this guy. I'm your host, Comic Tom. Let's talk art. So this is my dad, my father.
All day.
And for 27 years.
Yeah, no kidding. I'm so freaking old.
When did you start collecting comics and getting into comics?
That's the weird thing. As some of you might know, I grew up in Puerto Rico, so I wasn't exposed to comic books or any other things that you get exposed to here. So growing up in Puerto Rico, there was a lot of things like movies and whatnot, like
anime.
Messenger Z, Ultraman, Star Blazers. That's what I grew up on. But I didn't know. I was such a comic book nerd, but I didn't know it. I love Spider-Man Show, all that other stuff. But I came to the States when I was 15, and I was not able to get into those things until I was 20. And a friend of ours, Adam English from Ookla The Mok and Rand Bellavia. Adam
English did the logo to the show you're watching right now.
That is correct.
He did the Bags and Board caricature.
That is correct. He was a good friend of mine for a long, long time, and the guitar player. Both of them are the guitar players for Ookla The Mok, a band that I was in. And when they found out that I didn't read comics or knew anything about them, they came to me with a stack of comic books, and it was Dark Knight Returns, Watchmen, Sandman, Frank Miller Daredevil, and Frank Miller Avengers.
Heck yeah.
And I was hooked. But it also ruined me because they showed me the best, and now I'm incapable of like reading old Spider-Man. I read it, I'm like, why would I read this?
I was chatting with Ryan, who is we're going to be doing a series pretty soon. We had a few requests from our new subscribers. Mm-hmm. They've reached out and said, hey, I really like what you're doing. It would be cool to get more reviews / like up and coming important history to kind of coincide with upcoming moving releases. And the example that's come up multiple times is, people want to get ready for the Infinity Gauntlet stuff. Mm-hmm. And what's fun is that Infinity Gauntlet took place over the course of, something like 5 or 6 months, or maybe possibly even longer. It might have been a year. I'm not well versed with the series.
Me either.
But throughout that, there's all these different tie-ins, and a large number of the tie-ins take place in Silver Surfer. And then there's things like Thanos Quest and other things like that. So we're actually going to be compiling a list, this chronological list, and going through them and doing reviews on camera. And that's the first thing that we chatted about, was like, we were trying to figure out what to do it on. And this is good stuff. I mean, we're talking George Perez, and
sure.
This is good comic book content and a good comic book read. But in our discussion, I'm picking issues that we would want to do reviews on, or maybe series. The one thing that kept getting brought up, and it wasn't just me, he was bringing it up too, is like, yeah, man, but it's not going to be fun reading that old Spidey. It's not going to be fun reading that pre-Wolverine X-Men. Like, it's not the funnest thing. And I appreciate it for a different reason.
Exactly.
I'm a big fan of the art. I'm a big fan of the storytelling, but the storytelling is kind of secondary to the artists and like how it was made and who was part of the creation of it. Not as much the writing. And Ryan, the reason why he's doing this with me is because he is a fan of the writing. That comes first. Yeah. So these early books, they were soap operas. Yeah. I mean, really, that's what they were.
Yeah, clunky.
It's clunky novellas.
Yeah. That was my thing. I couldn't get into it. You read Sandman, which is just so beautifully written,
right?
And it becomes hard to read anything less. So.
I had to stop reading it.
Yeah, I do love collecting them.
I read the first 3 trades of Sandman because my list of reading is huge. I'm sure everyone can imagine. I'm writing out a list of scripts I want to make. And I realized like 3 years ago, when I wanted to do this, I wanted to make content around the comics I'm reading and working with on a regular basis, that I'm reading it and then I would make content on it, I'd write a script and then think, oh wow, I have to reread it now. And then the next thing I know, I'm rereading a Hellblazer book for like the third or fourth time in a given year because I'm, writing a script on it, or I have another idea for a video and I'm like, all right, let me see where I can get with that. So yeah, I'm having to reread them all regularly. So instead, now that I know that this is what I want to do and I want to make content around the things that I read, I have to that's becoming primary number one. So I'm waiting to finish Sandman because I want to finish it with the audience. I want to finish it with our followers and with our community because it's going to be fresh that way. And I'm actually going to have something new to say about it if other people haven't read it, or if they have, it's kind of fun to watch someone's first take at it.
I love it. I used to, after I got into comic books through Adam and Rand, we got really close to other comic book enthusiasts, and including our friend Jeff, and he owned 2 comic book stores in Buffalo, and that's how I became one of his employees. And he also became my landlord, which is why we lived in the back of the comic book store for a few years.
That's
because he gave me a job and an apartment, and we used to be able to walk through our kitchen door and step into a comic book store.
What year was this that we moved in?
97.
So let's kind of paint a picture for the audience here. There was and please correct me if I'm wrong. This is between the ages of like 7 and 10 years old that we were living at this place. And this was like a full apartment. It wasn't like we were living in the back of a store.
No, it was a full
it was an apartment. So there was a comic book store in the front, right, with the street view and everything. The store, I remember, was actually pretty big.
Yeah, it was fair size.
And I remember the front of the store, that's where the street view was.
Right.
And then there was a stairway to go upstairs, and there was an apartment on the upstairs.
That's where Jeff lives, the owner.
So the owner lived upstairs, comic store was downstairs, and then there was an apartment. Was it a 3-bedroom apartment?
2-bedroom.
My bedroom, your bedroom, and there was a third where your drums went in.
That's right, you're right.
So it was a 3-bedroom apartment behind the comic book store.
Like $200 a month or something. It was insane.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
That's pretty cool. I didn't know that. Yeah, that's pretty cool.
And yeah.
So aside from it being just like, it was a nice apartment. Yeah, there's a kitchen, and you know how you can go like right into the living room, or you can go left through a door and then you're in the back of a comic book store.
That's correct.
And I just remember being able to like wake up at pretty much any point of the day. Not wake up at any point. I remember being able to just stop at any point of the day while being there. I remember listening to a lot of Hanson at that time.
Yeah,
bopping it up like crazy, and playing my PlayStation. So that would have been Resident Evil 2 around that time, because you let me play that game, and I turned out fine. And yeah, if I got tired of doing that, I'd go through those doors and there'd be just rows of tables, people playing Magic and D&D. And I'd be like, I want to play Magic right now. So grab my deck that was just trash. I just put together a bunch of cards and went at it. Went and played Magic whenever I wanted.
It was great. I loved it.
What did you do there?
Well, I just ran the store when Jeff wasn't there. I did, I think, 3 or 4 days a week, and usually mornings, and especially Wednesdays, which was, as you know, is like Christmas. So I was able to grab my coffee, my robe, walk in and wait for UPS guy to come in with all the comics and just break that out and put them away and stuff. It was a fantastic time.
I like that you said your robe too. You never went in there naked?
A couple times.
I would end up going in there naked at some point by mistake, like just, oh shoot, the guy's here. We got to go. Let's go. Just go out there straight. Say hi to the UPS man.
Yeah. Seriously though, it was just a blast. And the cool thing was that we would do, the store would be up until about 7 or 8, but Thursday, Friday, and Saturday we would close the doors, but we would keep the cool people in the store, and we would play either Magic or D&D all night long. And that's where, I don't know if you remember, where I would make food. I would actually make a ton of chili and sell it for like $2 a bowl or something. Yeah,
when you started going to conventions, I remember like you putting as much time into prepping the little Slim Jims you were going to bring to sell.
Dude.
And the pop at the convention.
Absolutely.
More than the comics themselves.
Yeah, because I know. That's what we made our money on. And my friend Jeff didn't do that. I would have to make him. It's like, dude, you have to go to Costco or whatever it was. I can't remember what it is. BJ's or something in Buffalo, New York. Fantasy. And told him, just bring a ton of Slim Jims, pop, chips, whatever. And that's how we made our money, because if you're playing D&D, you're not buying anything. You have everything. You're not going to buy a master's guide when you walk in. You already have all that. So what you make the money on is the people sitting there and eating food. So that's what we did.
I mean, how long was the average D&D game that you remember?
Oh, God.
6 hours?
Yeah, at least. At least.
How many 2 liters of soda would people go through?
Insane. There'll be a guy with 8 Slim Jims, a giant bag of Doritos, and a 2-liter Coke. And he would pound that like nothing. I remember a guy.
Sounds like a good night, man.
It was a blast, dude. And one of the guys that did that with us, his name was Paul. I believe his name was Paul. I don't even know where this guy is anymore. I hope to see him someday. He gave you a bunch of beta Magic the Gathering cards, and I don't know what happened to those. But they were all common. But I think even now, common beta.
There's a handful of them that I recognize at Russ's shop. That I'm like, I know I was playing with that in a deck.
It's insane. He's like, yeah. But he told me, he's like, I want Tommy to have these. I don't want you to sell them or anything. These are Tommy's cards. And I never did. They were just somebody either took them or
I probably sold them or something.
We
I don't
moved
even know.
So many times. So
yeah, and I got into Pokemon hard.
Oh yeah, I remember
around the time and dropped Magic entirely.
Yeah. So I did that. Met my lovely wife, and we moved to California.
Oh, this is where the story gets kind of fun, because you didn't just move to California. You moved to California with an entire comic book store.
Correct. Well, I didn't move with the store. I moved, and then I would say maybe 6 months later, my friend, I called him, or he might have called me. I can't remember. I think I called him, and I asked him, hey, how are you doing? How's the store? And he tells me 6 months ago or 4 months ago, I locked the door on my way out and I never went back.
It's like you left, and 2 months later, the shop owner just said, I don't want to do it anymore.
Right. It might have been a little longer after. I can't exactly remember how long it was, but I know that it had been months. He just locked the door and he was done with it. He had been doing it for decades, and he was just done. And the next thing out of his mouth is, do you want it? And I'm like, what do you mean? He's like, the store. Do you want the store? I'm like, dude, I'm in California. He's like, yeah, just buy everything in it. Everything inside this room. It's yours. Take it.
He wanted it out.
Yeah. I'm like, no, dude, I can't. I don't know. I talked to my wife, and my wife, awesome woman she is. She's like, oh, absolutely. Let's make that happen. Called him back, and we're like, yeah, let's do it. And we actually flew to Buffalo and packed a whole store. Hundreds of thousands of comics, hundreds of thousands of Magic the Gathering cards, Star Trek, Overpower, Pokemon, boxes. I had sealed boxes of Tempest, of Weatherlight, all that other stuff. It was right after Tempest Stronghold, I think it was the last one, or Ursus Legacy or some other expansion. And all of that, we ended up sending it to California. And I would work I worked for Hope, taking care of people with developmental disabilities, and decided to quit my job and do that full time. And I was sorting Magic cards in our garage. I don't know if you remember that. I had
Heck
that.
Yeah.
It was
There was
amazing.
a lot.
It was a good time.
I remember.
It's insane.
I remember moving comic book boxes a lot. Like I got a lot of training. I've moved so many comic book boxes in my life, and I'm pretty young. I'm excited to. I should start counting.
Seriously.
I mean, it's like there's got to be a record for it, and I bet no one's ever counted the record of like how many comic book boxes moved in a certain time frame. Because we would move like. You'd be like, all right, we need to move 70 lawn boxes to the barn because we have these people coming over. Mm-hmm. And then we need to move those 70 lawn boxes back.
Well, it was more than that, because it went from top to bottom, side to side, this giant 30 by 20 room in our one dwelling in our house. And it was packed, and then more. And that's not counting toys and dice and
Yeah, there was so many toys.
Yeah. So I put all that stuff in on eBay, and that's where we got Geek Street. My wife came up with that name, Geek Street. And that's where
things kind of started. Yeah.
Yeah.
You met a lot of people. That's how we met Russ and John Hill over at Hills of Comics in Auburn, one of the largest comic shops in the state.
Well, yeah, I had gone through all the Magic the Gathering, everything. I mean, you don't even realize how much crap.
Let's tell them to give you perspective, because I remember this moment happening. We had my aunt living with us for maybe a couple years. She's from New York. Well, originally from Puerto Rico, but she's from New York, and she moved up to kind of help out with the family because my sister was just recently born. We had all these comics. We were, just like needing some help, and she wanted to have a change of scenery. So she flew out, and keep in mind, English is her second language.
Right.
So, and the reason why I mention that is because she's very much interested in the literature, in the art.
She loved it, yeah.
But reading old comic stories wasn't her passion. Her passion was, correct me if I'm wrong. I don't want to say this incorrectly, but her passion was in the tedious work. I remember her being the first person to volunteer to wrap our Christmas presents.
I know.
And
she was amazing at it too.
Oh yeah, she was really good.
Every Christmas, my wife and I are like, we wish Alice was here, because she just loves doing it and did it so well.
So I remember you got her doing sorting, bagging, and boarding and stuff, and you found something really cool.
She found it.
So she found something.
She
really
had
cool.
pulled it out for me.
What happened? It was in a.
Well, she showed me. She's like, "Hey, I saw something. I don't know. You might be interested in this." And it's a full long box. None of these comic books have bags or boards. And she pulls it out, and it's an Avengers #2. And I take it out. I'm looking at it. And I'm like, this can't be an Avengers #2 just sitting here. It has to be a reprint or something. It wasn't. It was an Avengers #2, and that's one of the. It's probably not even the most expensive comic book in there, but that's the one that I recognized at the time. That's being something really, really cool. She found it. Yeah, she used to just love bagging and boarding. It was her thing.
Yeah,
it was awesome.
But that's got to be fun. Something like that. If you have a long box of things that aren't bagged and boarded, that means that those comics haven't been touched. They're probably underneath some table or in the back room for 10, 15 years.
Yeah, I'm sure when we were packing, if you go to a comic book store, you'll see there'll be piles of comic books just sitting everywhere, like here behind us. There's just piles of comic books. And I'm sure at one point we grabbed this pile of comic books, put it in a box, and shipped it. And we found it. It was amazing. And we found a bunch of issues of TMNT. First print, which also, it took me a day to figure out that these were actually legit. And because if you look it up, there have been...
there's 5 or 6 printings of the first one.
Yeah, and there's some that are not real. They're...
some counterfeits?
Yeah, there's counterfeits. And you can find them because of
the ad.
There's an ad. Yeah, gobbledygook. That ad.
The gobbledygook ad.
Yeah, thank you. I can't say that. And as I said, I'm very Puerto Rican. And it was amazing. And if I
you guys
tell you,
only knew how many words I stopped them you can't say it like that. Dude, I do the same thing though.
I was going to say, you would all fall on your ass if you knew how much I sold it for. The TMNT #1. And I'm not even going to say because I'm so embarrassed.
What would be better is if we ended the story here, because I think that's a whole nother layer of fun information.
Absolutely.
Because when you got that collection back, you came to the States. You came to the States.
Yeah, in the boat. I put it in the boat.
I get the 70 long boxes in the boat. No, when you came down to California, ended up in Washington, your goal was to start a comic book store.
Yeah, Geek Street was going to be our comic book store.
You wanted to start a comic book store, and you should, at that point, you had 2 decisions. One was to open a retail brick and mortar, or 2, start to just sell them. Just start hustling. eBay was becoming a pretty popular way to move comics.
Right.
Why don't we end with the decision making?
Well, one of the things that I found that was probably the number one influential thing that I found in that buy of that whole store, and it was a book called So You Want to Be a Comic Book Retailer. And I got this, I'm like,
wasn't it for dummies?
No, it was. That's what it was called. No, it was called So You Want to Be a Comic Book Retailer.
I thought there was a. Oh, maybe you got that, and then you bought eBay for Dummies after that.
Yeah, that's what. Okay. Anyway, so I found this book. So You Want to Be a Comic Book Retailer, and the very first thing is, don't. And I'm like, okay, that's weird. And they say,
like the first page. I remember you showing me this way back when you're like, Tom, remember I told you I was going to start a comic book store? I remember that moment, but I was like, oh, okay.
And
okay, Dad.
the rate of comic book stores that close within a year is staggering. So you have to know what you're doing. And so I completely stopped and rethought, okay, if I'm going to do this successfully, I need to figure out a way to do it. And that's eBay and all the other things that we ended up doing.
Very cool. And we ended up meeting a lot of cool people. We ended up starting a lot of new relationships because of that decision to basically step into what is the comic book community in the Pacific Northwest.
We met great people.
Yeah, we have a lot of cool stories about some of the people that we met.
I can't wait to get into that.
Yeah, so we'll get into that another time. But for now, I just want to say thank you so much for watching. And as always, geek responsibly. Enough said. If you like this video, hit the thumbs up and don't forget to subscribe if you want to see more comic book content like this. Also, check out the GTFO Podcast. I'll put his link in the description. Luis is dropping some awesome stuff.